Yeah, so welcome to our fifth show and tell session at Center for Technology and Learning. As you know, this particular show and tell event is designed specifically for our doctoral researcher and all the career researcher, including myself. And then this topic today that we're going to talk about is one of the most probably popular topic that everyone really wants to get much out of it. So today we have Steve Wright with us, which is great that he could just help us to learn all about this new techniques and technologies. So Steve, as you may know, many of you, is one of the longest member of the center. And as you can see here from my introduction, he is now a learning technologist for the Faculty of Health and Medicine at Lancaster University. However, before that, he used to be ours. So he used to be a learning technology at and for the TEL program from the period of that we setting up the program and then up to the cohort 2. And from cohort 3 that he enrolled himself as a PhD student, he has been our doctoral student member for 3 years, and he finished in 2014 with his famous thesis that everyone may know on the sensory assessment of craft beer. And I put the blog, you can see on the right side of screen that his blog website, and he has the blog talking about the in vivo and athletics TI, which is going to be a topic of today's session as well. So Steve's research interest is in research method and methodology development, and especially that he's currently interested in how machine learning can help us to automatically code and semantically analyze our data, which is going to be awesome if that's really, really happening. Everyone will be so much happier and our life will be so much easier. So I really welcome, it's a great kind of opportunity for having him as speaker. And also I have to mention that we will have 2 of our doctoral researcher who's going to share their experience of working with Steve and also working with different tools for their dissertation project, who is Anoud Abusalim and Sandra Flynn. Just a couple of clear things, a couple of house cleaning things. So feel free to use chat. We can jump into myself and Brett will be around. And also Steve will pick up the questions and thoughts from there. And if you can turn off your microphone, that will be awesome. If not, I can mute yourself as well. And within the TEL program and within the TEL Center, we encourage people to turn on the camera if you can. I mean, you don't have to do so, but I mean, it's always nice to have the feel that we're as a little community interacting together. So my camera will be on during the session, but feel free to do so. The session will be recorded and uploaded on CTEL YouTube channel. So for those people who can't make it today, but interested in listening to it. And if you want to tweet about it, that's a little hashtag you can use, and our TEL Lancaster ID. So I think that's all I will share at the beginning of the session. Other than that, I can't wait to learn about it. Steve, are you ready to come in?
Yeah, I think so. So let me just say, okay, so I should be sharing some sound. So hopefully you can see my screen there. I'm just going to try and do a little bit of as soon as you start sharing stuff, you lose everything from Zoom. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for the excellent introduction there. So many thanks, Kyungmee and Brett, for inviting me to do this session. Yeah, I was laughing at the line of an infamous thesis or famous thesis. It's up on ePrints if anybody wants to go and see it was a truly left field thesis, to the extent that's the table of contents where I tried to actually make the whole thing symmetrical in terms of length and data, and it was there's a lot of data in it. The one thing you will probably really notice if you did look through this thesis is the sheer amount of data thrown in. And it was very much driven by methods. It was very much driven by a real challenge to work with very different types of data, and things like this page here, which is actually second by second or millisecond by millisecond video frames. So this is a sort of almost autoethnographic engagement of me filming myself doing a tasting exam. And in this is like a revulsion reaction to being given a beer that was intentionally soured, and then you had to analyze where the sourness was, what the likely cause was, and provide feedback. And I did okay because I identified a sourness, but I got the cause wrong in that I didn't pick up it was lactic sourness as distinct from an acetic sourness, which would suggest a lactobacillus infection rather than acetobacter. It was quite technical becoming a beer judge. You actually have to learn quite a bit. But as I say, there was an enormous amount of data and really working with the incredible challenge of how do you understand the way that two people who are tasting something together try to agree on A, what it tastes like, and B, whether it's any good. And what information and data and technologies are assembled through those practices. This led me to, as you can probably see on screen, quite unbelievably complex transcription and an interest in transcription. So I had a background in conversation analysis that I'd done in my master's, and I brought that into play here. So that has continued, and I really had to, I started using Atlas TI. My supervisor, Mary Hamilton, used Atlas TI. I broke it about 7 times, and there were at least 7 updates issued during my thesis for stuff that I'd broken. And they're like, "What are you doing?" At the end of which I was contacted by Atlas. I said, "Have you ever thought about running training? Because you really do know this software now, in that you have hacked it and posted tutorials online going, yeah, I know the manual says this, but by the way, if you go into the XML file, you can do other stuff." So that's kind of where I got really interested in this area. It was the intersection of technology and research and methods that I was most interested in. So this session is it's a bit of a broad, it will be fairly open and flexible. We'll see how it goes. But I wanted to demonstrate some new e-research possibilities, and also really draw in some of the phenomenal projects I have seen through the 2 modules that I run, or the projects and workshops I run. So I'm really want to extend sincere thanks to Anoud and Sandra for volunteering to demonstrate their projects in this. I wanted to actually pull up some of my PhD thesis project. I don't usually get to show it to people because it's kind of absurdly complex, but it did really push the limits of what you could do. But there were some other new things as well. So I want to come back to some of that stuff about transcription, but not just in terms of a simplified view of get it correct, get it down, make it efficient, and then start the analysis, but actually thinking about transcription. And within this, there's some ways of working with CACDAS software, so computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software, and that can include some of the auto transcription stuff. I want to start with the provocation. It's a quote I wheel out quite regularly. That it would appear that after the invention of the tape recorder, much of sociology took a deep sigh, sank back into the chair, and decided to think very little about the potential of technology for the practical work of doing sociology. I am frequently amazed or depressed or astounded by the amount of research that is using technologies from the cutting edge of 1967. As soon as the tape recorder got invented, it's oh brilliant, we can tape record things. I'll go out, interview maybe 10 people, tape record it, transcribe it, done. Some things don't seem to have moved on a lot from that. And this leads to this second quote, that qualitative analysts have mostly reacted to the newfound wealth of online and digital data by ignoring it. They use their new computerized analysis possibilities, so the power and the potential of the software that I'm going to be showing, to do more detailed analysis of the same small amount of data. So rather than going, whoa, we could actually look at thousands of documents, no, I'm going to do in-depth analysis of 12. This is going into the transcription bit, so I'm going to skip back from that and just stick with that provocation. Sandra, when would it suit you to present?
I'm okay, Steve. I have until about 1:15, so I'd say anytime.
Do you want to jump in now, just so that you're not going, oh, well, when have I got to get it done? Because I think that actually, if you could demonstrate your project, that would provide a fantastic context for the kind of software I'm talking about, and stop me just yattering on at everyone.
Okay, well, let's do that then. And I hope everybody can hear me and see my screen. I won't turn my camera on because it'll all get very complicated here with one laptop and one iPad. So I hope that's okay. All right, so thanks, Steve, for inviting me along. I'm attending the pre-conference event of the British Society of Gerontology today. So we're in our lunch break. I will be presenting this paper. It's a 5-minute paper in just over an hour's time. So I decided it might be appropriate to just slot in a couple of slides on how NVivo helped me with this. So, if you don't mind bearing with me, we'll go through the slides so you can get the context of this piece of research, and we'll talk a little bit about the NVivo piece as well. So, okay, so let me start moving on. So the title is there. Okay, so, what was my project about, what I did, why did I do it? Well, during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the importance was highlighted for information and communications technologies that we know as ICTs for the over 70-year-olds in Ireland in order to stay in contact with family and friends while confined to their homes. I was particularly interested in finding out whether young people provided support to their older family members during this time, and if they did, what learnings they took away from this intergenerational exchange. I undertook the research for a simple reason. In Ireland, an age-based digital divide continues to exist. Eurostat data for Ireland indicates that in 2019, 33% of adults between the ages of 65 and 74 had never accessed the internet. This compares with 8% for Denmark, a country of similar population size to Ireland. And it's worth mentioning that Eurostat did not publish data for those aged 75 years and older, since it was optional for member states to send this information to Eurostat. I like to think that data published for 2020 is a direct result of a recommendation from this research, and that this practice will continue. The overarching question of the study is represented here, and I have a couple of supporting research questions as well, so you can read those there for yourselves. To answer the questions shown on the slide, I conducted an online survey of 442 young people between the ages of 18 .
Sandra, I think you mute yourself somehow.
Yeah, I think something just
Welcome
happened.
back.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so
this is actually me. I went to admit somebody from the waiting room and it just moved. I think somebody else admitted them just as I was clicking, it moved on to Sandra's mute button.
No bother. Well, you've had a chance to read my overarching question and supporting research questions there. So I'll just move on and just chat a little bit about the answer. So in order to answer the questions on the slide, I conducted an online survey of young people between the ages of 18 and 25 at 2 universities in Ireland. I was hoping to get maybe 100 responses. I had vague notions of using NVivo because many of these questions were open-ended. Why NVivo over Atlas TI? I'll let Steve talk to that later. But anyway, I ended up with responses from 442 young people, and found that over half of those, 56%, supported one or more family members with digital communications during the spring 2020 lockdown period between March and May. So 56% of that number of 442, that was going to be a lot of data. So I had to be thinking about this and how I would manage it. Interestingly, from the data perspective, on the flip side of the 44% who did not provide such support, key reasons given were that their family member was already skilled in this area and didn't require any support, 19%. A further 15% said that their family member had no access to or interest in technology. And sadly, others reported having no older living family members. You may not be interested in this, but this is for my audience a little bit later. So moving on to the next slide. Okay, so how did I analyze the data? Well, the information on these two slides is taken from a blog post that I wrote, so that's the link. I happen to be a reflective practitioner, and Steve will talk a lot about, reflexivity, and I write stuff about my journey as I go, so that's where I hold that. But really, the question that I had was, how was I going to be able to code 460 survey cases? Steve calls them cases, so I call them cases too. And how would I use that data to tell the story of my research? It became quite clear that Excel was not going to do this for me. Therefore, I turned to NVivo. So I signed up for Steve's course last autumn. I purchased my copy of Jackson Baisley, Third Ed, and everything moved on from there. So the tips I'd like to share with you today is really to do with preparation. So Steve will probably talk about poets, or you may have heard that previously, but about the preparation, really, it is all key. And it was really, really important. And these are notes that I took for myself because it can get very jumbled. I had successfully pulled my Excel file into NVivo, and I was trying to code, and I really didn't know what I was doing, and it all just went a little bit haywire. So these are the steps that I would kind of recommend really for everybody to have a look at, really, that I think are most important. So ensure that there's one header row. When you export it out of Qualtrics into Excel, you will end up with two. Why two? Don't know, but anyway, it's you can just get rid of one of those, so that makes it nice and clean. And make the header row for each column meaningful. So that you understand what the data is pulling across. You can actually do this in Qualtrics, I've learned since, so that is useful. So again, it's all in the preparation, I think, is really the most important things to think about there. The third point that I have is to add in an initial column ID. Steve taught me to do this. I did it. You just had a number 1 through 440 odd, whatever it was. And it just made it easier to track back and to trace what participants were saying, a little bit later. So very, very simple tips here, definitely all in the preparation. And number 4, to delete all unnecessary columns. So when you create a project in Qualtrics, you'll have a lot of stuff. There'll be, the duration, the time taken, whether they consented or not. So there's a lot of maybe 10 columns that you really, you don't need. So just get rid of them. And basically that will just make it all cleaner. And this is all in Excel, so I think that's really important. Don't leave it until you go into NVivo to try and figure all this out. Just do it as much as possible in Excel. I originally had 460 responses, but 18 did not provide consent. For them, the survey ended. That was it. So I ended up with 442. I deleted those columns because there was no point in bringing them in. And this was a really, really important one. So in step 6, so what I had done was I had a question where I asked participants to select, a number, a multiple choice list, and maybe, 2, 3, select all that apply. You know how that basically works. But in Excel then, oh Lord, that was just really quite messy. And you had, a column with if you had 2 choices, it was in one column. If you had 6 choices. So what I did there was just to make it easier, and again, it's all in the design, but I'll know better obviously next time. But I basically broke out each of those into the different columns so that the data was easier to manage, and it just worked the way through. And that was really it. So just briefly, and I don't have a slide on this, but when we brought it into NVivo, then it was much easier to follow. And because this was all qualitative data, there were two queries that I definitely would just not go past. So when you're, theory building. So the matrix coding query was one. I thought that one was really, really important. And the crosstab query. So you could look at the relationships between the different variables. Now, I don't claim to be an expert or anything like that, but essentially that these are the kind of things that I felt really, really important. So in a nutshell, that's kind of like how I did it. And here's what I found. So these themes essentially came out of that particular data. So first of all, being able to support older family members requiring assistance with their digital communications was very important to the participants. So whether their family member was aged under 65 or over 75, it really didn't matter. They just wanted to help. And the support was equally distributed across the three age groups. So whether under 65, whether 65 to 74 or over 75 years of age. And I consider this theme then that supported the place of family connections and intrafamilial learning. The second theme was when provided with the support to engage with the technologies, the older family members understood what they were being taught, and many continued to engage with digital communications once the lockdown period had passed. And we know what happened after, the first lockdown period, and in Ireland, we're literally only coming out of the latest one. 90% of the participants who supported their family members considered the experience to be successful. So again, this is my theme of intergenerational learning that's coming through. The intended learning outcome was supported, digital communication skills amongst their older family members. Third, participants commented on the positive impacts of the experience for their older family members in addition to theme 2, the intended learning outcome. And this theme supported increased confidence, independence, greater contact and interaction with friends and family, and potential for loneliness and isolation averted. Now, this is the first time you've heard me mention loneliness and isolation. I found this in NVivo. These terms were mentioned so many times, and I had already found literature on them and so on. So for open-ended questions, it was really, really great to be able to look at the frequency of these words coming through, how they were interpreted, and reflecting on them in comparison or by comparison with my research questions. So these were all really, really important, and NVivo played such an important role in terms of pulling these through. And then finally, the young people also benefited from the experience, and they appreciated the importance of digital communications technologies across all generations. So they realized how much they themselves take technology for granted, and developed patience with their older family members as they learned how to use the technologies. And this theme supported the reciprocal nature of the exchange. I don't think there's any way I could have pulled all this together from Excel anywhere else. I really couldn't have done it without NVivo. So, okay, so I think my research is important because it demonstrates that an age-based digital divide persists in Ireland in the third decade of the 21st century. The study shows that family exchanges across generations have the potential to promote reciprocal lifelong learning opportunities. Learning begins at home. And for those without family members to support them, community and neighborhood channels could provide some structure for an intergenerational learning arrangement. So for anyone interested, my PhD project extends this research and asks to what extent and how can intergenerational relationships support informal and non-formal lifelong learning through uses of digital technologies in Ireland. And I look forward to sharing this journey. I'm sharing it already with many of you, and feel free to stay connected with me through these channels. So that's it for me, and thank you for listening.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sandra. I think that was really nice to see a kind of like working through to what you can get out of NVivo. And one of the things with NVivo is it can really support a kind of analysis that allows you to divide your data and then explore your data. So you index your data, you add codes to your data, and then you can view those codes based on demographic information. So you can, instead of just saying, right, show me everything that everyone said in response to, using Skype, you can instead divide it, say, I want to see the difference between the people who were carers and the people who were not, the people who were aged 65 to 69, those 70 to 74, etc. Now, I will share my screen at this point. If you bear with, we will loop back round to some of the things that Sandra showed. So hopefully you can see my screen and see my I'm just going to try and pull up participants for various other bits on the other screen just to keep an eye on that. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to my slides to pick up on the theme about transcription. So I want to start with some transcription and then look a little bit further along at what you can do with some of these other analysis. So one of the things that happens with transcription generally is, that sort of idea of what you say is important, but how you say it is really changes the understanding, the interpretation. So I want to try a little experiment with you all. So if anybody would like to try transcribing this in the chat, I'm just going to play you a video. Hopefully you will hear the audio back, hear the audio online. And if anybody wants to have a go at trying to transcribe as we listen in the chat, that would be great. Okay.
Welcome to Dalek Relaxation for Humans. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Now exhale through your mouth softly. Focus on slowing down your breathing into a calm rhythm. Inhale. You are becoming more and more calm. Exhale. You are feeling more and more relaxed. Inhale. Calm. Exhale, relaxed. Inhale, calm. Exhale, relaxed. Inhale, calm. Exhale, relaxed. Continue to breathe slowly and calmly. The aches and stresses of daily life are floating away. Your tension has been exterminated. Exterminated!
So hopefully that's left you all feeling distinctly calm, which is great. I'm hoping that's helped everyone relax a bit and feel much calmer. The thing with this is obviously it's complete nonsense, but everything about it is predicated on the sound. Now, so I'll just now one of the things you can then do is those trying to transcribe that. It was really impressive. I've got to say that was incredibly good and very quick transcription. Transcribing is not easy, but everything in the intonation is a challenge. So you've had to start writing as an order, and so on. It's really difficult, especially, and that was quite limited language, limited words, and quite short. You can, however, if you go to other videos on YouTube, they will often have actual built-in automatic subtitles. So that can be used, and some people have used that as a bit of a hack. just grab a pitch meeting. Okay, so we're going to go to this.
So you have a Captain America.
Now, I've been using a program called 4K Video Downloader. You literally just paste a link. And I can say, I want to download that video in high quality. And I also want the English auto-translated. You can even bring down Spanish, German, auto-translated. And this will download that video and the transcripts for me. So this is one way of working. Another thing is if you are working with Zoom. So at the end of this meeting, you would be able to download the automatically transcribed text file from this meeting if it's on that only works on an institutional or educational or enterprise license. But if you have ever done any videos yourself, or done any of your transcribing via or done any of your interviewing via Teams, then your videos will appear in Stream. And for most of your Stream videos, you would be able to say, so this was one of my one-to-one support meetings. There's a transcript here. And on this, you can then go into the video details and you can download the caption file and download the video. I know I just went through that really, really quickly. It is detailed elsewhere more slowly. Now with Atlas TI, you have the option of importing these directly. So Atlas TI is one of these programs, these computer that we have two licensed at Lancaster University. We have Atlas TI and we have NVivo. There are some differences between them. And one of the things I wanted to show you in this was the kind of, if you like that, the headline difference of their capabilities. But with this, I can literally go and add a file. I can go and grab that video file that I will have just downloaded. Captain America and the Winter Soldier pitch meeting, and that will bring the video in. Now the great thing with Atlas TI is fantastic for working with video files. You can watch them, you can see the track as it runs down, you can select directly in it, you can create,
I mean, I'd have to come up with another title.
You can pause that. I can then make a comment about that section of the text, which could be a partial transcript. It could just be some notes. So I could make some notes, flapping papers around and so on. And then, okay, so that's him flapping papers around.
I mean, I'd have to come up with another title and everything. Yeah.
So, okay, actually, I want to shorten that to there, and I could potentially analyze the video by who is on screen and so on. So you can work very nicely and directly with a video. But I can also say import the transcript, and this should have brought down the transcript. And Atlas TI has actually built this in directly. So I did a little bit of work chatting to them, showing them, and they just were like, "Yeah, we can do this." So I had worked with a colleague to build something to clean up subtitles and showed it to Atlas TI, and they went, "Oh yeah, we can write that." So that has literally just brought in that automatic transcript, and it will synchronize the two together. So I can say, yeah, I want this synchronized scrolling. So as I scroll down here, it shows the line on the right from the auto subtitles.
These 3 helicarriers, and these things will kill people by the millions. Okay. And Nick Fury starts to figure out that something fishy is going on, so Hydra tries to assassinate him. Uh-oh. Yeah.
So I can then also edit this. So this is where you start to cash in. I can edit this, change that and go, he goes, actually, uh-oh, and I could label who is speaking. So this is exec, whereas this is the picture, so it's right in this pit.
Going on, so Hydra tries to assassinate him. Uh-oh. Yeah, well, luckily everybody has horrible aim, so he does pretty well for himself. Oh, good. But then...
And so on. So I could work through and correct this. Now, one of the nice things with this, with the playback, is that as I am playing this back, I can change the slow it down. Much easier to transcribe like this.
Winter Soldier shows up. Oh, Bucky shows up.
And I can continue to edit, but with a much slower playback.
Well, yeah, but we don't know that it's Bucky yet. Yeah.
And just using the F4 button, I can do play pause.
Yes, we do. And he shoots an
and so on. So I can now correct the transcript. So you can do this direct from a transcript from Teams or from Zoom. And you can then start working with that automatically generated transcript and correct it. Now, this loops me back to some thinking about this. So, Eleanor Ox has a great paper where she argues that the transcription procedure is responsive to cultural biases and it self-biases readings and inferences. It is important to consider this because for nearly all studies based on performance, the transcriptions are the researcher's data. And transcription is a selective process reflecting theoretical goals and definitions. And with the exception of conversation analysis, so looping back to where I kind of came from with regards to transcription. So with the exception of conversation analysis, the process of transcription has not really been foregrounded in studies of verbal behavior. And Anoud and William argued that transcription is an act that has received rather limited scholarly discussion in the past. And to the extent it has been addressed, there are two primary ways of doing so. One is a very instrumental manner. So here students are continuously taught the art of transcription is to get it all down on paper correctly. Now from that model, the idea here is just very, very simply to say, right, get this right. Is it right? Let's play it back.
Explosive thing at Fury's car. Well, I didn't.
And just go through it. Did they get it correct or not? Now, that's fine. But actually, there were debates in the writing culture that have left a faint trace themselves as students are warned of how issues of power embedded in the transcriber's choices. And actually, if we look back, excellent work there. So, Paul, you stated you are feeling more and more relaxed as an order. So this is one of those ways of trying to bring in some of that non-verbal considerations. But how do we actually transcribe the choice of words, dialects? How do we indicate pauses? Or do we include or omit fragmental sentences and time-filling sounds? Now, a lot of these transcription technologies are very much about getting rid of that. So there is something to be considered in this. And one of the things I really like is the opportunity you have when you have these two things together to start to actually bring in reflection and analysis within this process. So rather than just saying,
They start with that. They wanted to play with.
So I just need to say, okay, I want the synchronized scrolling on. It's because I'm in edit mode. But
The little guns first.
I can go through this and I can start again from the beginning.
So you have a Captain America sequel script for me? Yes, sir.
There we go. There, sir, I do. It's called.
It's called Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Oh, the Winter Soldier, huh?
So I could label this, but there's something I could do here to actually create a quotation and write some notes about it. So I could write some notes about how are they speaking. Just saying it's very over the top. But I can also start to potentially think about codes in this. So it might just be saying, I need to come back to this. I need to look this up, or I need to think about this further. So at this stage, all I would be doing is potentially making some corrections to the transcript, but I could also start to think about coding for or adding a layer of coding around emotion. So to loop back to the presentation, I'll pick this up in a second. Oh, I am indeed jumping around. One of the things with this synchronization, it enables this annotating and what I'm calling the 3 T's. So you can start to consider the tone, the tenor, and the tempo of the spoken language and how that is linked to, which is lost when you just turn it into text. And each of those links as well to what I'm kind of terming the 3 E's. So that is emotion. Do they sound happy, sad, excited? What's their engagement? Do they sound bored, interested, enthusiastic? And enunciation. So that's partly, are they being deliberately clear? Is there regional accents in here? And all of those things. And these are linked, and most of this gets lost. And to me, this is the really exciting opportunity here, is much more around the possibilities of bringing those things into analysis rather than this just being quicker. However, let's not kid around. It is quicker. So there is another way. Finally, a third way of doing automatic transcription. If you go to Microsoft Word Online and create a blank document, you can choose from the drop-down menu. It says dictate. That's not what you want. You want transcribe. You can upload an audio file and you can choose different languages. And this is working in several different languages. So for example, if I took any of these downloaded videos, let's just grab something very, very short. And I'm just going to say, right, please transcribe the audio file. And this Microsoft Word will transcribe that for you. It tends to do the 93% of it incredibly quickly and then take a little while over the last bit. But if we pop back, we'll see this in a second. Now, you can then, again, you can then import this transcript in, and because it includes timestamps, you can link the two together. Now, I know I've gone over a lot of this very, very quickly, but the reason I'm kind of covering it quickly is because over on my blog, which is linked to, I have got exhaustively detailed step-by-steps of transcribing in Microsoft Word with video demonstrations, how to bring it into Atlas TI, how to bring it into Max QDA, and how to bring it into NVivo. I've equally got Atlas TI or NVivo step-by-step guides on how to do this and bring files in. Okay, there we go. That is now there. And I can say add to document with speaker and timestamps. But I could change the speaker and say this is Doctor Who change all speakers. And then add this to document with speakers and timestamps. And this has added that in. There were a couple of steps, minor steps, to do a small amount of reformatting, and that usually involves going to Microsoft Word Desktop just to do search and replaces. But it really is very, very straightforward. You can correct here, but I've certainly heard from one person I've been supporting who said that they did a lot of this. They would do about an hour's transcript. They worked to about 45 minutes, and then Microsoft Word would either crash online or something would go wrong. So there is something to be said for doing gross corrections and then downloading a transcript and the file. But this is one approach to working with Atlas TI is particularly good for this. You can do the same thing in NVivo. And then you can start adding codes and so on. So I could label who the speakers are, or I could start looking through and tagging things in this. The other option, and this is where it becomes very interesting in Atlas TI, is, let me open a piece of literature. Now I could then move this to, say, a new tab group at the bottom and decide to view 3 things at once. So I've got the video, the transcript here, but down here is a piece of literature, where in this piece of literature, this relates directly to, or as I'm reading the transcript, I'm thinking, it reminds me of what it says over in that article. So I can then say, okay, yeah, that bit there, I want to create a quotation, identify that as a piece of data. And these two I want to link together to say this justifies or it supports my conclusion here. Obviously not in this case because this is a ridiculous picture.
Oh, the Winter Soldier, huh? Let's see what that's all about. Yeah, I'd much prefer if you didn't Google the title. Oh, the Winter...
There we go. And so on. So we can do, you can create links between these bits. And this is where you can really extend your analysis. So this is the opportunities that there are with Atlas TI. Okay. Now, so that's one approach. This is very much the beginning and working with transcripts. What I would really like to do right now, I think, is to invite Anoud to speak, who has done an absolutely fantastic job with the project, where she has started out with an initial layer of coding and then has gone through it and really organized it and really brought that together. So I will stop screen sharing. That's kind of shown you one bit of one way of working much more rapidly around transcription. So I'll hand over to Anoud, who will then hopefully talk you through her project, show you where she's been working with Atlas TI. And then I want to look at something with larger scale data and auto coding. Okay, I shall stop sharing. And are you? Oh, yeah. Hi, Anoud. How are you?
Hey, I am here. Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. Hopefully, you've got a project you can share.
Well, I have the screenshots and I have the project. I can start with the PowerPoint.
That'd be brilliant. Yeah.
You can take charge as you do.
No, I don't. I let students
so
do
with
their
this
stuff.
project, Steve has been amazing. So everyone can see the screen, yeah?
Yeah, we've got a good view of the screen.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Just to walk you through this project, obviously, Steve, who has been very helpful with it, it's about knowledge production and research publishing practices, especially from the point of view of native English speakers, NES, and researchers who have English as an additional language, such as myself. This research problem was developed when I started working on my thesis at the beginning of 2020 in response to lacking comparative work between native speakers of English and the research publishing practices and English as additional language. This is important to remember to figure out the amount of data I have collected through my interviews and later on my textual analysis. So like Sandra did, those are my research questions. And I know Sandra has shown en vivo, however, I am a big fan of Atlas TI and I find it far easier to use, more intuitive, especially with Mac, similar to the computer I'm using to finish writing my thesis. I started with Atlas TI. I just want to go into full screen so so you can all see pictures. I started with Atlas TI for literature review, and as Steve would vouch, Atlas TI is very strong software for literature review. The annotation within the text, the coding within the text becomes very easy. It connects nicely with EndNote. I found it far more powerful than NVivo. And obviously this is part of my literature review for the thesis, but you can, the codes and how they are developed in Atlas TI, they work really well for me as a visual learner, in that you can see the connections well, how it's presented, the alphabetization, the structure of it. I just find it very easy to follow and easy to navigate. So back to my literature review, 2020 stories. What is extremely powerful for me and works really well in Atlas TI is the networks. I know NVivo has something similar. However, this is part of my literature review for the thesis. And like everyone at the beginning of the project, I was not clear about the gap or the contribution or what's not. And the network feature in Atlas TI, and that's what Steve was referring to, how everything was so overwhelming at the beginning. The network feature in Atlas TI was really helpful in allowing me to view the research problem from different points of view, different perspectives. Obviously, this has worked for me because I am a visual learner, and I found a nice software that can gather all of those articles together and all of my annotations and all of my notes, and I could play with it. At that time, when I think I was working on the literature review, I had around 300 articles, and till then you can see it becomes far more organized. Again, this was all just a search for the contribution and defining and refining the research problem. I'm particularly partial to the network feature in Atlas TI because it got me a publication, not Atlas TI in particular, but once I identified the research problem, I could articulate it, and this is why I chose the screenshots, because I was still circling around language and different problems and what's happening, and I just took screenshots from my proofs to show that how Atlas TI gave easy reference to all of the sources with the multiple revisions. What I liked about Atlas TI is that I was working always in the same environment. So my literature, that the documents are there, the annotations are there. Probably it's the same with NVivo, but the networks are there. Do you want to, Steve, do you want to talk about how I did the code book, or should, because you know the struggle with it more?
Yeah. Do you have Atlas TI on your machine?
I do.
Because it was the way that you'd used code groups that was really neat, and actually has now, for me, has shifted the way that I'm thinking about teaching Atlas TI, because you've really picked up on something they've changed and improved in the interface. But it's just been really, really neat working with that. So it might be an idea to show that, in part because it will also then help show that the absurdly complex thing I show next, you don't have to do. There is an easier way, because the way that I did it was way more complex, and in retrospect it has merit, but my lord, did I build complexity.
We're talking about this, yes? My colorful tree?
Yeah, so it's
yeah.
the, yeah.
Yeah, so this began when I was looking for, I'm sharing Atlas TI, yeah? When I was talking to Steve and about creating. Yes, here you go, Steve. You know what to do. Just let me close all of my documents. So this is how it looks. I know it looks terrifying now, but here we're talking about 22 interviews and 500 articles.
Brilliant. So yeah. So what we're seeing here is how you've organized codes. So initially these started out, and then you've placed them under a higher level. And if you can open and close each of those groups, can't you? So one of the things that's really nice within this is you can say, I want to see within a group of codes. So actually it makes it quite, it's one of the things that NVivo does really neatly, and people often struggle to find in Atlas TI, whereby it's like, well, I just want to deal with, I don't want to worry about everything, all the detail under levels or journals. I just want to pick up everything about journals, all of it, all the stuff about journals. What's going on with journals? Well, actually, you've then got subcodes. So we're looking at the code groups here. Are we here, or is this the codes?
So this is the codes, and then.
So if you drop down, if you scroll down there to the actual code groups lower down.
I don't want to share any data. Like I want to check that I closed all of the interviews. So
yeah.
No one sees. Yes, and then I will go back to the code groups. Just give me a sec.
Yeah, this is one of the challenges. Sometimes the challenge. I would absolutely love to share some of the videos of working with Anoud, but of course they are still primary data. So then there are restrictions on what you can and can't share until everything is further anonymized.
Well, it is anonymized already, but still, I want to put that. Just yes, I am ready now. Okay, there were no open interviews or anything. So yes, this is how I organized it here. And then you go, Steve.
Yeah, so again, so this is what I really like, is that by looking at this, you can open and close these groups and see the codes, but you can work much more you can kind of group things together. So they started out in very different places, but then through a process of reading, reviewing, and organizing the codes, what had been a very bottom-up code structure was put into a much more higher level conceptual structure, such that you can then say, right, I would like to see how did this group of, say, native speakers versus dual language versus additional language speakers, what is the difference between what they say on each of these conceptual categories? And those are the kind of queries you can build, which become a really powerful method of analysis. So the process to get here was long and slow. I think I would be right in saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really, thank you, Anoud. It's really nice to see. So again, there's this idea of you start very close to the data, you work on it, but then you can abstract things to a higher level and start thinking about how do things connect conceptually. Now I'm going to try and show you a much more complex version of that, actually over complex. But so going back to my thesis data, so here is, for example, where I have got on the left is a video.
Sorry about that.
This was taken with a digital pen. So I gave my participants these digital pens and just printed out sheets of paper, and they wrote on those,
Right,
and it also recorded at the same time. So I was able to actually go back. So if you look on the left there, you'll actually see the writing appearing in green.
to be in recording with a
good effort. And you can literally see. And what's interesting, well, what was interesting for me was I was really looking at the sequence. How is categorization done in practice? So this is people doing categorization of taste. And while this was going on, it was silent. So I was interested in the difference between different groups of people and how did they do their assessments? Were they silent? Did they talk to each other? Was it like people, oh, that's really nice? Or was there a kind of, there was a particular quiet and then they would talk and discuss? And actually, so I was recording this and sequencing it. And as you can see on the left, I was coding this for who is speaking, and then some very specific data driven at the level of occasional phrases. So they were using the language of assessment for tasting and balance. They were using the who was speaking. They were classifying appearance. They were classifying things. So I had this incredible, and when I say, I mean, so in my project, I ended up with something like 800 documents. There's 700 in here. There are more, so bear with me. There's a delivery. Oh, brilliant. You can leave it at the front. 700 documents, just managing that is really, really hard. So what was important for me would be just to go, right, show me the audio. Right, there's the audio. Show me the transcripts. Just show me the emails. I want to see the recipes. I want to see the photographs. So there was part of it was seeing things just for the type of data, but also which class were these? Because yes, there were online classes for analyze, for working together. This when did this happen? So I was able to categorize every document in here and filter it. So then I built up a code structure that was not thematic coding. This was very, very driven by a kind of organizer trying to analyze how categorization was done. It was basically a category analysis, not a thematic analysis. This led to codes that were named with some care. So I would have stars before some of them, and then I would have accounts of different activities. Each one has a definition that tells you how it is going to be used, what it is going to be used. An enormous number of codes. Some of these codes are for very specific objective things. So when was there a mention of a specific style of beer? When was there an assessment going on? When were there archetypes? What about conversation analysis sequences? And then I had a theoretical framework. And what I did with that theoretical framework was I took from a research paper, a model developed by a guy called Antoine Hennion about amateur practices shared. It was partly about wine aficionados, but also the conditions of taste and assembling taste. So he said there were 4 elements. There were the devices and conditions. There were tasting bodies. These were right at the top. There were bodies. There were relationships between bodies and objects. There was the tasted object. And there were the devices and conditions of tasting. So this was a 4-way model that he created. I then went through, and this is pretty much my thesis in a nutshell, that I would take concepts that were very, very grounded in the theory, like, okay, there is packaging, different types of packaging from images. So I could go and say, and in this, I would be able to see the comments and some of the previews, and I would be able to say, I want to add neighbors, quotations, and actually see the specific elements in my data where that occurred. So that was one way of working with it, to literally go, right, here are all of these things. So I conceptually linked these things together, these very, very grounded elements of categorization of data from ethnography, from my videos and video stills and so on, to a higher conceptual level. That bottle lists were then part of a higher level materials transport of packaging, which was part of a broader transport system, which was part of action and movement, which was part of the defiances, conditions and situations of taste, which were part of the. So I then did a lot of conceptual linking. And what I was able to do as a result was not only view things as a network here, but also construct queries so that I could do a analyze. I could then start constructing code co-occurrence tables to look at where was there an intersection between any of these things around particular actants or particular or bodies or the tasted object, and I'll just do select all and compare that against all the other codes and start exploring points between them to go like, that's interesting. Chapter 3, I hadn't expected to see these bits across diverse data. So this is one of the things where you get to kind of cash in all of that work, all of that grounding up, that you can start going, whoa, I had not seen that there was this intersection between these concepts and this data. So that's one way of working with it. Another way is to, if I had undertaken a different analysis, so more like Anoud's, then I would be able to compare against groups of people. So I was able to start exploring this, and then you can start looking at patterns within this and relationships and different things. So that's where you can go with this kind of stuff. Now, so far we've seen Atlas TI quite a lot. I just want to show you a very different approach, and this is available with NVivo. Now, with NVivo, I took on a project to look at all the comments from the National Student Survey. So the National Student Survey comes in as a very big data set. I think there were 2,000 responses from students. All the information you get is which type of comment is it? Is it a positive comment, a negative comment, or a comment about the institution? And which department are they from? That's all you get. But NVivo has a thing called auto-coding, which is a form of content analysis that allowed me to not read this survey. So I didn't actually want to read it. What I wanted to know is, where are they talking about certain topics? Now, the chance of this opening when I've just shown you everything else is, oh, it might just crash. So here we go. Here's a survey, basically, lots and lots and lots of data. That's only one page, 1,884 records. You can literally in NVivo run you can click on a file and you can say autocode identify themes. It does not identify themes. What it does is it identifies noun phrases and it puts them together. So in this case, it finds a word that co-occurs with another word in a in an infrequent way. So it looks at the frequency of words in a document and calculates that against the inverse document frequency in order to start to show. So I need to see the chat. and then it starts saying, well, these two appear together. So the one theme, they call it a theme, is academic. But what we're talking about here is academic advice, academic advisors, academic affairs, academic atmosphere, academic community. So all of these have the phrase academic or academics. And the words it co-occurs with as a noun phrase. It then groups them together to say all of that stuff includes academic. All of this stuff includes atmosphere. So my next task was to organize this stuff into meaningful categories. So I created a top level category, a bit like I just showed you previously in Atlas TI, but with a lot less theory. So I was saying, okay, I'm looking for one thing. The task was to look at what are the problems with assessment. We know we get low marks on assessment and feedback, what's going on. So I created one top level thing of teaching, learning and assessment. Then I also needed to capture the other stuff. So I just threw it into some bags, one called student experience and the other called university campus and facilities. Within teaching, learning and assessment, I had a look across some of these and created some other top level categories. So there was a lot of stuff about staff, there was stuff about teaching, stuff about learning, stuff about assessment, course organization, time and the environment. So these were driven by a mixture of reading some of those groups that were created, but how do you logically structure them? So course organization, that involved things like the course structure, modules and groups. And what you can see in here is that a lot of this I created course structure, whereas groups was already auto-created. So there was a mixture, sort of an abductive approach. It was a bottom-up automated content analysis that was then put into a top-down conceptualization and organization. This then allows you to run queries. So the other thing it also has is sentiment. You can run automated sentiment analysis and it'll say, is it positive or negative? So for a survey like this, it's fantastic. For discursive stuff, perhaps less so. But when people are asked to say, write an evaluation, and it's surprisingly good at sentiment analysis for saying, if it says that was not bad, it doesn't go, oh, bad. It's not bad, moderately positive. Whereas that was terrible, that sentence would be marked as generally negative. So that allowed me to do things like create a query to say, right, let's look across the FAST departments and see what are the comments that are negative views on assessment versus positive views. Now, because educational research doesn't have an undergraduate program, wasn't included in this. But it did allow you to start looking at charts to see, is there any exception here? And to notice that there were just more responses from law. So these mustn't be treated as quantitative. They're not standardized, they're not normalized. They are basically a visual index. But it would allow me to go and say, right, what are the positive views of assessment in sociology? Were there anywhere where it was the opposite way around? What are the differences? And it should then give you a set of phrases. Could be improved by more days being spent, work, settings in notice being learned. So these are suggestions, give them a mark easily. Some of them are really harsh markers. Library has an excellent range of books for social work. So these are their positive views in that general area. They have something to do with assessment. It's a bit rough, but the point with this was I didn't read it, but I was able to pull out some much more useful data rather than going, here's everything. Here are all the comments for your department. Go away and read them. So you have the opportunity to start being able to say, I want to see a topic against a sentiment for a group. So this is showing different departments are the only real group here. So are the auto-coded noun phrases generated automatically? Yes, you can basically take a data set in and you can right click and code it. So I have done a similar approach on another piece of work where I took in so I'm just going to try and change this. So I did some initial work with the White House. US White House publishes all of its press releases and its press conferences. And I took an interest in this. And this was also an experiment of working in Atlas TI and moving a project to NVivo and back and learning my way through that. But in this, I took all these press conference reports, started out in Atlas TI because Atlas TI has a great tool for automatically tagging who is speaking in a transcript. So I use that to say, just tell me who the speakers are. I don't know who all the speakers are. And then I imported all of them into NVivo with the speakers tagged and just ran auto-coding to try and pick up themes. And then you can actually run some analysis to say, right, show me what did President Trump generally say? What did he talk about compared with other people, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, etc. Again, this is going to be quite slow showing it. But this was, so here are all the presidential remarks, and I'm hoping I've only got document type X, but I could then create or run a query to say I would like to see in my rows let's go and find the president. At this time it was President Trump. Okay, and in the columns auto-coded themes. So this hasn't had any post-processing. And I can just say run. But this would give you an idea of who was talking about which topics within this. So I can start to look at Dr. Birx versus Dr. Fauci versus the president, the vice president, and so on. You can also bring in Twitter data and so on. But it's this opportunity to start working potentially with larger data sets. I have a feeling this might be a slightly earlier stage. These might actually be from Twitter. But yeah, so again, these are opportunities to potentially work with slightly larger data sets and then work in addition. So rather than you can extract the content and then you could go in and say, right, I want to go and look at everything President Trump said about the Diamond Princess, for example, and then start potentially identifying areas for deeper or further or more. Now I'm not sure why that has pulled up so little, but yeah, as I say, I've not looked at the inner structure of this project. So that's kind of another option with these programs. So I think that draws me to a close. I can pick up with a few bits, so I can make these slides available. It's got various links in them. But primarily, this is detailed on my blog. I've got to give a big shout out to Tim Ellis in ISS, who did create this really cool tool here, which will clean up an SRT or a VTT file in order for it to be imported into NVivo or other programs. So yeah, I've kind of thrown a lot of stuff at you. There's always a bit of a kind of, I'll throw this at you and see if it sticks. Were there any further questions? I am very happy to take questions if anybody just wants to use their microphone, video, say hi, ask any questions, ask for any further demonstrations. And a massive thanks to Anoud and oh no, I'm trying to remember names now. Never ever try and remember names on the fly. Sandra, for their contributions. So any questions from anybody?
There is one question from Sally on the chat. Do you want to pick up?
As a complete novice, well, I run training. I run 2 modules within FAS, and I run training across the university. There is also a team where you can join and you can access all of the various recordings. So if you go in here, and there is a channel there called Choosing Software, and within Choosing Software there are all the recordings from 2 seminars, or you can go to session recordings. All of the session recordings are there, which takes you through what to consider for choosing software, getting started, introductions to Atlas TI, introductions to NVivo, kind of next steps in both, and then there are bookable one-to-one support slots, which is what Anoud and Sandra have referred to. So when I've done a one-to-one with them remotely, we've done remote screen share, had a look, talked about what they want to achieve in their project, kind of I've had a poke around their project and gone, okay, what I would suggest you might want to do next is, and yeah, I think as you have hopefully seen, the level of outputs and analysis and the kind of confidence of the analysis going, I know that I looked at, I did a really good comparison of these 2 groups of people and what they said. That's one of the things that's really nice, is a feeling of, it's like, yeah, I have actually looked at the data properly, rather than gone, I wish I knew how to handle this. So I'll put the link up to join this team in the chat. There won't be much activity in that team until probably next academic year now, but there is stacks of stuff in there. There should be, for each one, there should usually be a recordings tab where all the recordings from all the various sessions are hosted. So you can go back to them. I'm not going to promise that they're not in a bit of a random order. They often are. But there are lots and lots and lots of bits there, and you can see a variety of different rooms in my house, probably.
Okay, so I mean, one of the questions I personally have, if I may, is, I mean, I think many of our students are at the moment trying to decide which software they want to go for. So I just noticed that you had a nice slide there about SWOT analysis you tried to do. If you can just kind of summarize that, and we can, I mean, we learned a lot today, but just to make sure which function is available for which software, that will be really nice to capture.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's important. So this was about the this is a SWOT analysis more about transcription within the software, but so again, I think, you know, there are things about the possibilities of doing that automatic transcription and bringing it in. I'm a huge fan of it. I mean, personally, having done work like this, auto transcription, correcting auto transcripts takes about 1.5 hours to 2 hours for an hour's audio. Transcribing manually by hand takes 4 to 7. That's about 3 or 4 hours per hour of audio that you've now got to spend on doing something more useful. So a lot of this is, and I think there are some bits about this, that there will be supervisors out there who will be very much like, no, you need to transcribe in the way I did when I did my PhD, because that's the way you should do it. Is essentially what they'll talk about, is getting immersed in the data and so on. But if you are really listening back to the audio in depth and correcting it and engaging with it and making notes and starting your analysis, hopefully you're able to actually move on from just a mechanistic getting it down correctly and calling that immersion into a much more actually engaged consideration and nuanced consideration of what the action of transcription is. So I don't buy this, if you transcribe it manually, you will be immersed in your data argument. I think it skates, weirdly, it both skates over the surface and also requires masses of time and frustration. So it gives the impression of depth without necessarily causing it. But in terms of choosing software, I mean, the other thing is you don't have to get it right. There are advantages and disadvantages, but both Atlas TI and NVivo will do most. They've got more in common than they have different. There are particular things that like that auto coding Atlas TI doesn't do. Atlas TI has a different function, similar but different, called named entity recognition. Now, named entity recognition is fantastic if you haven't anonymized your transcripts or you haven't anonymized your data and you want something to go through and say, this looks like a name. It'll do that brilliantly. They haven't moved beyond that, but they've got sentiment analysis there. But both products, you can move from one to the other, and it will move most of your stuff. So, but the principles of how you use NVivo and how you use Atlas TI, again, they have more in common than they do that is different. And that is exemplified in the university by so I highly recommend, if you don't, the other place, where do you want to get started? Well, qualitative analysis using NVivo, or qualitative analysis using Atlas TI. There are two books. More than half of the book is the same. The first half of it is all about principles for working with software. Then it has 2 chapters about how that piece of software is structured, and then it has some case studies. But they really exemplify how much similarity there is, and they will really get you. These will stop you digging deep, deep holes that you then have to get yourself out of, because they basically have one message, which is stop and think what you're doing before you do it. That's it boiled down in a nutshell. So those are other ways of getting started. So as a novice beginner, which one would you recommend, NVivo or Atlas TI? The answer to that is a little bit like asking which is better, a hammer or a drill. And the answer is, well, have you got a nail or a screw? Because if you've got a screw, you want a screwdriver. If you've got a nail, you want a hammer. So which is better depends on what's your data, what's your part of your operating system, Mac or Windows. There are differences between their implementations. What sort of data do you want to do, and what sort of analysis approach are you taking? You can't do this kind of automated highly automated topic content analysis. You can't do that in Atlas TI at the moment, and you can't do this kind of putting codes into multiple places in NVivo. But the question with either of those is not, is either of them right? The question is either of them relevant for your project? What data do you have, and what analysis approach do you plan to take? But you can also move from one to the other. So partly try one, try the other, watch those videos if you want to have a look, and don't worry about it. You can move from one to the other. It is not that difficult. The principles are the same. Are there any further questions? Thanks, Nick, for the shout out. So Sally auto-coded generated automatically in NVivo. Yes, they are. So that is the function. It automatically codes noun phrases in NVivo, but then you need to make that have any use. I think something else Anoud was picking up there is how much it pays off at the writing phrase. So one of the ones to think about with these codes and you'll actually see one or two of these. If I search in my codes, I must have something called quote, I'm sure. No, CH. So I definitely ended up with these, like chapter 3, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 4, you can create codes to just, oh yeah, I want to quote that in chapter 4. It's not a thematic analysis, but it's really, really useful for using codes. Codes are just a way of indexing your data for the purposes that you need in your project at that time. And that could be thematic analysis, or it could be it could be just a very practical thing. Can you combine both? Not necessarily combine, but you can move from one program to the other. There are some limits, but then they're usually the sort of limits that affect me because I'm trying to test out some really odd, obscure thing. But if you have a basic coding structure and a set of data, yes, you can move a whole project from Atlas TI to NVivo and vice versa. Combining using both, it's not necessarily you would combine, but you might sequentially move. And as I said, yeah, so are the auto-coded noun phrases generated automatically? Yes, they are. And that is an opportunity. So I think there are opportunities that this can open up. And what I'm really hoping, why I want to present like this, is I hope that if you realize that new things are possible, we might move beyond just everyone going, well, we can't do much. So I want to finish. I know I've gone over time. 50 years ago, academic social scientists were might be seen as occupying the apex of a generally limited social science research apparatus. Now they occupy an increasingly marginal position in the huge research infrastructure that forms an integral part of what Thrift calls knowing capitalism. 40 years ago or so, academic sociologists were remarkable methodological innovators. But now a lot of sociology is doing very, very small amounts of data. Meanwhile, Facebook is sifting and working out and profiling people on a large scale. So I think it's a strong argument that we need a radical mixture of methods coupled with renewed critical reflection. A call for descriptive sociology that does not involve sole reliance on narrative, but seeks to link narrative, numbers, and images in ways that engage with and critique the kind of routine transactional analyses that now proliferate. A lot of what's being done is quite crude, but it's being done at scale. I think we need to be innovating more. So I hope for those who are doing e-research that this might prompt you to think, ooh, can I go further? I've definitely gone over time. I think I should probably hand over to Kyungmee or Brett to say thank you and goodbye, Steve.
Thank you so much. I thought we have it's 2-hour session, wasn't it?
Ah, is it? I thought it was till 2 o'clock. I don't have my calendar. I don't have my calendar up, so I'm kind of like I'm working on the theory we're finishing at 2, because I've shut everything down that tells me how long things are on for.
No, thank you so much, Steve. I think that's okay. I think we can, unless we have a question from audience. I think probably it's like really dense, a lot going on from this presentation. I think so everyone should go probably and take a rest and then come back to it. Think about all the details that you try to insert in our brain. And
I mean, I'm very happy to slow down and show some things more slowly if people want. So if there's anything people would like me to cover, I'm very, very happy to restate some of these things.
I mean, just one clarification, Steve, is that the people should be in your module to do the one-on-one session, or people can just jump into one-on-one session and ask you to meet them in person.
Yes, you should register for one of my modules. So there are 2 modules via the FAST Research Training Program, FAST 638 and 639. So 638 is for Atlas TI, 639 is for NVivo. And from there, you do some basic getting started stuff, choose your department, mode of study, and pin the map. It's really nice seeing the map. I love this map. It shows me kind of where my students are. That I have quite an interesting and diverse range of people. And then you can book a one-to-one support session, which is via LibCal, and then I make some recordings of those available afterwards. But these depend very much on it not being empirical data, and because mostly it's supporting people's projects, often it's supporting stuff where you're like, well, you don't have permission to share this, do you? So the videos by default are private to those who book on. In practice, I do a lot of ad hoc support as well. So if you can't get a one-to-one session, you can always drop me a message. I mean, Anoud has had a few where she's just dropped me an email and gone, oh, I've got to get this done, and it's we've picked things up quite quickly. And there are quite a few people I've I've got to know a lot of people through doing this now. I've worked with, and I'm working with a few research teams as well across the uni. So I do stuff with staff on a very ad hoc basis, but ad hoc works. And a lot of it, I try and, I feel like some of the stuff, I know I've gone through things really quickly, but partly it's going, here's what you can do. If you want to find out how, I've written it up in exhaustive detail with loads of videos and demonstrations. So I'm not here to teach step by step, because you guys can go away and do that. Thank you, Anoud. You're very nice.
Yeah, you got a lot of positive feedback about the one-on-one session. I mean, personally, my supervisor kind of was saying that it's amazing that how much he could just know right after the session. Start with he didn't know anything before, just having that meeting. And so maybe we can close the session like this, and it's really good to know that we have the way to come back to you, and probably it will be much better for us to have our own needs and discuss it with you rather than just right now to unpack everything here. So thank you so much again, Steve, and it was great pleasure to have you today. And I mean, you're around, so let's hope that if we may need follow-up sessions, so we can always do another show and tell.
And again, I mean, I'm very happy to do anything either for the program or do a workshop or do bits and pieces. There will be another program of workshops next academic year, hopefully a bit less disrupted than this year that's just gone. But I will probably continue to run things online, because actually this is one of those things that's just worked better. It's actually a lot easier to run some of this stuff because you can see other people's screen on your screen. In a classroom, it's quite hard to you can't physically get people round a computer to look at stuff. And as I say, I mean, it's the thing that keeps me interested is that so many projects are so different, and seeing the way that different people have approached them and understood them, I learn lots. So I've learned an enormous amount from Anoud, from seeing her project and seeing how she's done it, and gone, wow, that really works. That approach is really, really good. Actually, that's better than the way I've thought about it before. So I'm always keen to support different things and see how it goes. That's why it's interesting. The analysis, I might finish with one thing, because this is kind of it's a bit like this when people are like, which
this glue will shock
blah,
you.
blah 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 blah. Have we got this? Have we got this? Yeah, so this is not. I'm not going to get it now.
This glue will shock you.
But there's a lot of things where you start introducing people to it, and it's like this. It's like, everybody, here's Atlas TI, here's how you're going to get going. I'm going to show you the tools. I'm going to give you a go. how to get going, and you set people off like this. And that's why it's fun, because each project goes in a different direction. And that's why there's a lot of one-to-ones. So I've shown you some principles here, but actually once you've done a transcript, if you're going down an autoethnography approach, if you're going down a kind of like, you could go in many, many different directions, and that's always makes it interesting. So yes, thank you for letting me contribute. I think I shall, yeah, I hope it's been of interest to people. Thank you for attending. Thank you very much to those who contributed, and do please join the team and sign up for stuff next year.
All right, so thanks so much for everyone to join in. If you can just kind of unmute yourself and say thank you to Steve with your voice, that would be great. And then with that, we can finish the session.
Thank you.
Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Cool. Cheers all. Thank you. I hope
Thank
to see
you.
some of you
Thank you,
soon.
Steve.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Learn from
Thank
you
you.
guys.